So it is the night before my planned elective C-section. Our bags are packed. We're literally ready to walk out the door unless I go into labor tonight, which I don't think is going to be the case. Basically, I had an emergency C-section with my son, and my doctor was worried about me going past my due date, and she was worried about a potential uterine rupture. And so she said, you know, she basically gave me a deadline. If you don't go into labor by your due date, you can do an induction or you can do a planned elective C-section. I felt like the chance of ending up in a C-section with an induction were high, and there was also other risks associated with that. And so ultimately we decided the best choice for our family was to do an elective C-section unless I went into labor, which didn't happen. I also came down with a cold, so my planned elected C-section got moved, and it is planned for tomorrow. We have a lot of mixed emotions. Obviously, we're excited, we're nervous, we're scared. I'm a little bit creeped out about getting cut open in the exact same spot that I was cut open previously, and also just a little hesitant and weary about the healing process, especially with a toddler who wants to be cuddled, he wants to be picked up, he wants to jump on me, and he's not necessarily going to understand that mommy's recovering, on top of getting comfortable with his new addition to the family. And all we can really do at this point is just hope and pray for a healthy baby girl and a smooth delivery. I will try to update you guys tomorrow morning before we head out to the hospital. My appointment's at 5:30 and then my surgery starts at 7:30. So we're hoping we'll be meeting her by about 8 o'clock or 8:30. Are you excited to meet your baby sister tomorrow? Are you excited?
No.
No?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, good. All right, guys, so we just got finished up with check-ins for the most part. We drove to the hospital about 5:30 this morning. It is 6:45, and my C-section is scheduled to start at 7:30. The preliminary check-in things just included getting into the robe, getting into our room, collecting a urine sample, blood sample. We are still waiting for an IV to get put in. They tried about 6 times and were unsuccessful in getting the IV line. From here, I will get the epidural, and then we will start the C-section at about 7:30.
Whatever you say, Doc.
All right, guys, it is Wednesday morning and I am back home from the hospital. We actually came back home last night and only spent one night overnight at the hospital, which is really rare for a C-section. I took a lot of video footage on the way and want to walk you through everything that went on from the time that I videoed last when we got admitted until when we got home. So when we were getting admitted, as I mentioned, it was really hard for them to get the IV going. So they ended up calling the anesthesiologist who put the IV in my hand, which he did use some sort of lidocaine before running it. So it wasn't painful at all. And we were able to get the IV going, no problem from there. Through the IV, they'll administer fluids to make sure that you're hydrated because you can't drink 12 hours before the procedure starts. So they want to make sure that you are hydrated through that IV. So once the IV was going and the liquids were going, they basically gave me, the anesthesiologist and the nurses gave me a rundown of what next steps would be. And after we kind of reviewed everything and I understood the processes and procedures, my husband was sent to a waiting area while I proceeded to the OR. But once we got into the OR area, I was by myself at that point, but escorted by nurses. The entire staff was super nice and they all introduced themselves while they were gowning up and putting their caps on and everything. And once I got into the OR room, I basically sat on the operation table, bent over so my spine was curled and exposed. The anesthesiologist sat behind me and he first administered a local anesthetic, which was the most painful part. Ultimately, nothing was that painful. It basically felt like a bee sting in my back. He administered that. Once the local anesthetic set in, it was just a couple seconds. He administered the spinal epidural or block, and it basically started numbing instantly. Once he got that in, my body was relaxed and I was able to relax a little bit more. It was pretty scary just going into the operation, especially after ending up an emergency C-section last time. Surgery is never something that you look forward to, and it's always a little bit scary going in. After they gave me the spinal anesthesia, they put a catheter in, which is really nice because then you don't have to worry about going to the bathroom, and it's not painful at all. You don't even feel them putting it in because you're already numb down there. Once they kind of laid me down on the operating table, they got me in kind of a star position with my arms out and my legs straight. Then they put up a curtain, and the curtain had a little window where I could see baby once baby did pop out. Once that was all set up, they brought my husband in. From there, my OB, who was the one that's performing the C-section, arrived with the midwife. And as soon as they arrived, they started doing some poking tests just to make sure I was completely numb. I didn't feel them poking at all. I actually did in my last C-section, and I think because it was an emergency one and the way that the drug was administered, it didn't hit me as hard right away, which was great because I was in a side conversation with my husband, who was on my right side, and the anesthesiologist was on my left, and he was basically there to administer any more drugs just in case I had some breakthrough pain or was feeling pain while they were doing the surgery. It was great because they had already gotten started, and I was like, are you guys already going? And she's like, yeah, we're already going. You're gonna feel some tugging and some pulling in a little bit. Pretty much right after she said that, they started tugging and pulling, and I was like, okay, they're pulling the baby out. And I was like kind of rocking back and forth because they were really, pulling to get her out of there. So once the pulling started, that took about 30 seconds, and then she was completely out. The pulling stopped, and I immediately heard crying, and I knew all was well. They put her up to the little window so I could see her. She was healthy as could be. From there, they immediately passed her on to the nurses for a really quick initial check, just to check her breathing, her vitals, and bundled her up, handed her to my husband, who got to show me her from behind the curtain. On my last C-section, I felt absolutely horrible from all the drugs and from being in labor for hours. I couldn't even handle my son being by me, which sounds so horrible. And you are in a really awkward position. You can't really hold your baby or comfort your baby. I just let my husband hold her and hold her so that I could see her and just kind of give me updates on what she looked like and what she was doing while they proceeded to close me up. To get her out from start to finish really took about 3 minutes. To sew me back up took about 30. So they proceeded to do that while he held her. I didn't need any more pain medication. I couldn't feel any pain, although I did feel pretty uncomfortable. Nothing specific, just feel really gross. That's how I felt, just really uneasy. And he said that when they take your uterus out, that's when you start to feel bad, not necessarily pain, but just that uneasy, gross feeling, uncomfortable, want it to be done. And then once they put your uterus back in, that's when you start to feel better. While they closed me up, he gave me some more medication through my IV, which was a morphine for the pain. And then he also gave some Tocin. Tocin helps your uterus contract after the birth, and then it also prevents excess bleeding from occurring after the C-section. From there, they took me into the recovering room where they just monitored my vitals, the vitals of the baby, got my first kind of mesh underwear and pad on, and we just stayed there while they closely monitored us until I could move my legs again and the numbness had gone away. Once I could move my legs, which was about 30 minutes, they brought me down into the main room that we were going to be staying in. So at this point, I was connected to the catheter, the IV. I'm just being wheeled around in a bed, basically, with the baby on top of me. Once we were down in that main room, they just start the routine checks, which is basically checking mom to make sure uterus is hard, the bleeding's under control, you're passing urine through the catheter, pain is under control, your incision looks good, pulse, and your blood pressure, and they just come in every few hours and check those things. For the baby, They checked, baby's vitals, make sure they're having wet diapers, that they have their first poop while they're there. They check all their vitals. They schedule a hearing test, a test with the pediatrician. They get you with a lactation consultant. So that's all on day 2 with baby. In that first day, the other thing that'll happen is within the first 12 hours, they'll want you to stand up, and within the first 24 hours, they'll want you to try to walk. So I was able to stand up within the 12 hours, and I was able to start walking within about 16 hours. And I was able to just walk around the room, brush my teeth, kind of get dressed. The other thing that will happen is they'll let you start like munching on ice chips. They do want you to wait as long as possible to like drink liquids and things, but at about 6 hours, they let you try ice chips. I wasn't able to keep anything down for 12 hours. At 12 hours, I was able to start eating ice chips, then drinking water. Then I had some Jello and some saltines, which is really important because you want to get those liquids going so you can get off the IV. Also start eating some normal food. And the other thing was to take my oral pain medication. So after 24 hours, the anesthesia is fully worn off and the morphine painkiller is fully worn off. And they want you to switch over to a Tylenol Motrin combination, which at the end of the day is a really mild painkiller after abdominal surgery. So they do offer more extreme painkillers if you have what they call breakthrough pain. I didn't experience any of this. They do offer Oxycontin and another dose of morphine as needed. I did not need any of those dosings, and I was happy about that because I didn't want to be on any more medication after that initial morphine dose, anesthesia, and Pitocin. On day 2, I felt pretty good. Like I woke up, I showered, I nursed the baby, I even made some phone calls, got some computer work done, was just feeling really good and way better than I was after my emergency C-section. My pain was really low, and that's why by the end of day 2, just being in the hospital all day, my husband and I were like, there's no point for us to be here. Like, we're ready to go home. And the doctors did give us very little pushback. We were able to pack our bags and leave pretty quickly. My overall mood and pain for the planned C-section versus the emergency C-section was so much less. Like my pain overall on a scale of 1 to 10 remained at about the 3 following the surgery, and even today, I felt like I had a lot more breakthrough pain in my emergency C-section. It was really hard for me to get in and out of bed, and this time I was scared it was going to be worse because it was my second C-section and they cut you open in the exact same spot, but it was actually really mild. And today's day 3. They said usually day 2 is your worst as far as pain goes. So I'm really excited to have gone through day 2 and already on day 3 and feeling really well. Mentally, I don't know if it was the fact that I actually went through labor and the amount of drugs that I had leading up to my emergency C-section just piling on top of each other, but mentally I felt so much more clear-headed the day after surgery than I did in my entire hospital stay last time. We stayed 2 nights at the hospital, which is still pretty quick turnaround to get in and out for your first baby and your first C-section. So if you are having a planned C-section, I hope this video was useful and kind of gave you an overview of expectations. When you get home, and even day 2 at the hospital, I wore a belly band to kind of keep everything protected and everything in. Been wearing like the mesh underwear with a pad. I'm going to be switching over to a panty liner. They'll go through like how much bleeding you can expect and specifics like that. But if you're having a planned C-section, like I said, it was way better than my emergency C-section, and I hope this video was useful. If you have any specific questions, definitely let me know in the comments. I try to get back to everyone as soon as possible, and I do a lot of videos on pregnancy, postpartum, and life with 2 young kiddos. So if you like that type of content, subscribe to my channel, and we will see you on the next video.